An uneventful Easter Monday and somber afternoon to all of you. Yours truly, Denise Osorio here, and this is PTV News Now. And today is a truly sad day. Pope Francis, the affable, universally loved, and most progressive-thinking pontiff in the history of Vatican, whose open mind and love for the poor and marginalized is legendary, has passed on after 2 months or over 2 months of recuperation from double lung cancer and managing to stay on till after Easter Sunday. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, Vatican Camerlengo, announced barely an hour and a half ago that Pope Francis returned to the home of the Father at 7:35 a.m. Vatican time. Pope Francis, otherwise known as Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio from Argentina, was the first pope to be elected from the Jesuit congregation, the first from the Americas and the Southern Hemisphere, and is known for his humility, staunch advocacy for human rights, and his more progressive views on the teachings of Christ. Pope Francis has a special place in the hearts of Filipinos for his pilgrimage to the country in mid-January of 2015, where millions gathered to see him wherever he spoke, or on the streets just to get a glimpse of him when his convoy passed. Pope Francis was 88 when he passed away today. Palace dismisses calls for military intel to back up the PNP on kidnapping cases. There has been a handful of kidnappings in the megacity over the last few months, mostly Chinese and driven by personal vendetta, and not the typical hostage for ransom type abductions driven by huge amounts of money. The sum up of Palace press officer and PCO spokesperson Undersecretary Claire Castro earlier today in refuting exaggerated claims by the administration's detractors of a mounting kidnapping spree and a worsening climate of lawlessness. Even more are the calls for the military intel intervention to back up the PNP to hopefully resolve the cases and put to bed the reported spate of isolated case abductions, the latest of which was the recent kidnapping of businessmen Anson Ke and driver. As of press time, the 3 prime suspects in the abduction of Ke and his driver, Armand Pabilio, are in the custody of the PNP anti-kidnapping group. Similarly, the nation's top cop, General Francisco Marbil, pushed back on calls to mobilize the intelligence services of the military or ISAFP and belied claims of a growing number of kidnap for ransom incidents, citing the string of Chinese kidnappings of late are all vendetta-driven and personal. Cashless fare payment on the MRT3 to take effect soon. Paying fare sans the cash in the mass transport sector is an idea whose utilization is way past due and has finally arrived. Towards such end, the MRT3 and the Department of Transportation are on a study on the viability of easing the hassles of the daily commute on the MRT3 railway line through a cashless payment scheme, even for single-trip or one-way ticket purchases. Coming off the long Lenten break, Department of Transportation Chief Vince Dizon noticed shorter queues on the MRT3 line following the deployment of 3 4-car trains in response to growing calls by MRT3 train commuters to add more cars to mitigate the agonizing wait and long queues during rush hours. Likewise, this move to add more cars and the anticipated mid-year deployment of the Dalian trains procured during the Aquino administration in 2014 is expected to slash the average waiting time between trains from 4 to 2.5 minutes. Potential bird flu pandemic keeps U.S. farmers, scientists on edge. The recent outbreak of the H5N1 avian influenza or bird flu virus in the U.S. has sparked fears and doubts of a potential human-to-human transmission, resulting in a more widespread and lethal pandemic. Likewise, farmers harbor new apprehensions of losing their livelihood if such scenario plays out. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias tells us more.
Feeding time.
George Terwilliger runs Pleasant Vale Farm in Delaplane, Virginia, west of Washington. He has modified his small-scale operation due to the H5N1 avian influenza virus. The so-called bird flu has resulted in not only a high U.S. bird mortality since 2022, but also a sharp increase in the price of eggs nationwide.
We here on this farm have not expanded our chickens over the last year or two out of fear that we might inadvertently bring birds in that are infected.
Terwilliger, a member of the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources Board, is also concerned about the risk bird flu could pose to his hogs and to about 100 cows and calves that he owns.
If the disease were to get to the point where it infects cattle and makes them sick or makes their meat, these are beef cattle, makes their meat unacceptable, that would put us out of business.
Bird flu in dairy cows was first reported in late March. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the public health risk remains low, with just 67 confirmed infections from animals to humans and 1 death. Constant changes in the genome of the virus, however, have some scientists worried.
If there are changes that make it more possible for the virus to transmit from person to person, which so far we haven't seen, then that could be a real challenge in terms of our public health response, and is the reason that we think of this virus as having pandemic potential.
People can minimize the risk of infection, Davis added.
Avoiding contact with sick or dead wild animals is probably the most important thing to do. We know that pasteurization of milk, cooking of meat to the recommended temperatures, and cooking of eggs are effective to really inactivate this particular virus.
Pet owners are advised to monitor recalls of contaminated pet food and raw milk, and to keep their pets away from contact with wild birds. As he keeps a watchful eye on the latest developments, Terwilliger is planning ahead.
Typically, sometime a month or so from now, we would buy turkey poults to raise turkeys for commercial sale at Thanksgiving. I'm not sure we'll do that this year because I would be concerned about where I get the birds from. Will they come with avian flu?
In the meantime, he says he'll follow the science and hopes that the disease runs its course, all while keeping a very close eye on his livestock. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Delaplane, Virginia.
And with that report, we've come to the end of the show. Join us on You a little later this evening for the back end of our twin bill set of newsbreakers for the day. And always keep in tune here for stories you can count on, news you can trust. I'm Denise Osorio, and thank you for watching PTV News Now.